We now start session number 4. Mr. Gadzikis will be the moderator. Mr. Gadzikis, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Newsfront Naftyliaki, the organizers, for giving me the opportunity to moderate one more session. This is the last session. We are about an hour away from lunch, and what we will try to do is to boost your appetites with starters like Net Zero Framework, Fuel EU, and EU ETS. With me, my name is Haris Gantsikis, I'm the Technical Manager of Arcatia. With me in this session will be in alphabetical order, Mr. Lefteris Koukoulopoulos, Regional Decarbonization Director of DNV, Mr. Dimitris Mitilinis, Senior Engineer from LATSCO, Mr. George Nikolaidis, Engineer for Mandatory Affairs ABS, and Mr. Alexander Prokopakis, Executive Director of IBIA. As you all know, last October, the IMO did not reach to a conclusion about NZF, so they moved their decision to October 2026 with an intermediate, let's say, course in April 2026. We don't know what the outcome is going to be. There are some proposals. I believe the last one we've seen was from Liberia and Panama. I'm not optimistic, and after the war with USA and Iran, or should I say not war, this is not a war, it's, yes, it's an expedition, it's an excursion, as Mr. Trump said. So after the war, I don't think that it's going to be easy to come to a conclusion. I hope they will overcome this. We'll go straight to questions and we'll ask with the first one. And obviously, all of you have the same question, the one that I have, is where do we stand with IMO now with Net Zero Framework? And we'll start with Lefteris.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon also from my side. This is in mind for everyone right now. It's the most hot topic being discussed. Where IMO is standing, are we going to have an agreement? What we see as a positive sign is that from ship owner side and shipping industry in general, we have a clear signal that we must do something. We must have a global framework, maybe not at this MEPC, maybe in the conclusion in October or November that's coming 2026, in order to be able to have a clear strategy for each shipping company to decide their pathway ahead, because uncertainty and non-decision is worse than a certain global framework. What we know for certain, as certain we can be at this point in time, is that the framework that as we know it, it's not again under discussion. This is clear. We didn't have a consensus. US is pushing in all sides. There is a lot of diplomatic actions for the net zero framework as we know it, not to go ahead. What it is good is that now we have several proposals on the table to be discussed in this MEPC, 84, end of April, and these ones to start the thread of negotiations towards the direction to have a global framework. The most interesting one, and one that has gained the most publicity, and it is in the spotlight right now, it's the one from Liberia, Panama, and Argentina, if I'm not mistaken, which is a new trajectory. It creates a new trajectory from the one we know, based on the availability of an alternative, of the alternative fuels, and their commercial competitiveness. And what, in essence, this means is for an alternative fuel to be characterized as alternative, it needs to have at least 5% market share and to be maximum 15% more expensive than the average fuel that we use now, let's say the VLSFO fuel. And, of course, the fuel that this is pointing towards is LNG. This is the one that we have right now, creating a relatively slow path until 2040, 2050. There are other proposals too. This is not the only one, of course, and this may also be for political reasons, to have other voices that can attract countries that they don't want to go with the side of Liberia, like the one from Japan, which is, again, another trajectory, stricter than the one from Liberia. Just to come back also to the previous proposal, is that none of these proposals have a fund mechanism. We only talk now for a technical measure. So we are going to calculate something and trade some SUs, some points between vessels in order to create compliance, but not with a central fund, because this is what US is opposing right now. They don't want, by no means, a single dollar to go to a United Nations fund. That is clear what US they don't want. So we have Liberia, Japan. We have Middle East countries that they, of course, have the US line. They are opposing any measure, and they want to start the negotiations and the discussions from scratch. EU, still they don't have reached an agreement based on what we know so far. Of course, we have 1 more month until the MEPC, but they're still discussing, and we have this difference between the southern and the northern countries. China is keeping their cards close as far as we know, but if they want something, they got a consensus for a mechanism to go ahead. And for US, we don't know what they want, but we know what they don't want. And they don't want, as we said, a global fund. This is clear from their side, but the positive is that they are open to negotiate when something mature is on the table and can move the discussions ahead. This is one track of IMO. The second one is that all the working groups are continuing on things like how to calculate an index, an intensity index, how to calculate a reward if something, a technology or a fuel is used by a vessel. And the last one they are discussing now in MEPC 84 is also the future of CII, that they have recognized the pathogenes of very short voyages, and for vessels staying a lot of time at anchorage or idling. And with this year, we start to gather more data from the ships in order, in 2 years' time, to have enough data to propose for corrections for these issues of CII.
Thank you, Lefteri. Alexander, IBIA's opinion on the future of NZF. Is it going to die? Is it going to stay there?
It's dead already. I think it's a common secret. Unfortunate. And to complement of some of the things that Lefteris very well put is that it's the first time that the industry was asking for regulation. And I'm not going to say IMO because a lot of people believe that this was a failure of IMO. It's not a failure of IMO. It's the failure of the governments. IMO did what they had to do, but the governments didn't want to go ahead. So let's put that on the table so we know who to blame. They didn't listen to the stakeholders. So where we stand today, as US is an opponent, is not going to go through. For me, as there are other countries that they don't want the monetary aspect on NZF, I think there's going to be a solution down the line. Obviously not at this MEPC and maybe not at the next MEPC. The biggest problem that I see, and we see, and I want to put here clearly that EBIA was and will keep supporting IMO for the simple reason that we need global regulations. The worst thing that can happen to shipping is have regional and local regulation that they distort the market. So we're going to continue alongside with other associations supporting IMO. So because a lot of times they're asking us, are you supporting NZF? And we say, no, we are supporting IMO. So to take that further, the biggest challenge that we see is what's going to happen on the last point of the USA's 5 point is that if we're going to have explicit or tacit acceptance. This is the biggest problem that for anything else. And, you know, there is a Greek saying that have your friends close and your enemies closer. It's a good thing that the United States stayed at the IMO. They left 65 United Nations associations, but they stayed at IMO. So they are on the table, and that's a good thing for the industry. But, and like I said, on all other points, I think down the line, easy way, hard way, we're going to find a solution. How the acceptance will be, I think that will be the biggest problem that we're going to have as an industry and as a whole, because if we change how things are accepted in IMO, then regulations can take decades to be in effect, and that will be the biggest problem. So, as the current situation, NGF is dead from our side, and let's see what's going to happen in the next MEPC.
Thank you. Let us go now to George. How do you think that this failure of, let's say, IMO, not IMO, but governments, as Alexander put it, is going to affect the CII framework?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon from my side. To understand the potential future of the CII framework, we should recall that the IMO plans to conduct phase 2 of the review of the short-term measure from 2026 to 2028. And the objective of this review is to align the revised short-term measure with the levels of ambition of the 2023 IMO GHG strategy, including the goal to reduce the CO2 emissions per unit of transport work by at least 40% by 2030 compared to 2008 on an average basis across shipping. Now, phase 2 of the review is informed by a large number of documents submitted to previous MEPC sessions, and these documents highlight structural challenges and gaps in the current CII framework. For example, it has been noted that ships can be penalized by factors outside of their control, such as idle time, port waiting time, or short voyages. Similarly, ships that spend more time in laden condition can also be penalized. In addition, the current CII framework does not address emission at a life cycle basis, not fully at least, with the exemption of biofuels where we have an interim guidance. Concerns have also been raised about the robustness of the enforcement mechanism, which currently relies on the submission of a corrective action plan for ships rated E for 1 year or D for 3 years. Specifically, with regard to the enhancement of the enforcement mechanism, there is a proposal for a SEMP-based approach. This involves the introduction of an energy efficiency implementation log and regular audits for continuous improvement of all ships, and this would replace the current structure that we have with a corrective action plan for ships rated E or D for 3 years. This is a proposal, of course, which will be discussed further at MEPC 84. And there are several other proposals to change the CII metric, for example, to exclude fuel consumption while the vessel is not underway, or to fully reflect the well-to-wake emissions in line with the 2024 LCA guidelines as they may be revised. And there is another proposal to adopt an energy-based metric expressed as energy consumed per unit of transport work. But a key part of phase 2 of the CII review will be the interaction and the synergies between the short-term measure, as it may be revised, and the mid-term measure, which we expect to be adopted anytime soon. But as the extraordinary MEPC session was adjourned, there is uncertainty regarding the final design and the level of ambition of the mid-term measure and the extent to which this will influence the ongoing review of the short-term measure. So, in this uncertainty, the role of CII becomes more important because improving ship energy efficiency through proven technologies and operational practices remains an effective solution, especially as shipping begins transitioning toward more expensive alternative fuels. And if the adoption of the meter measure is delayed, the CII will continue to play a critical role in driving emissions reductions and preparing the fleet for decarbonization.
Thank you. Dimitri, what signals do the ship owners need to get from the regulations to start investing in zero or near zero emission vessels?
Thank you. From operators' perspective, we need clarity and stability over time. Ships have an age of 20-25 years, so we need to understand the long-term direction. The last few years, you know, we had a lot of new regulations came into force. We had EUTS, FuelEU Maritime, CII, EXI. Now we have IMO Net Zero framework, and that is still evolving. So it's difficult to decide today which fuel or technology will be compliant in 2040, 2050. Then we need global alignment. There are different systems, different regulatory frameworks in different regions. We have EUTS and FuelEU that are already applicable, and we now discuss about new regulatory schemes, possibly in China or Japan or Singapore, plus UK ETS that will be into force in the next few months. So, if these regulations are not aligned, these regulatory frameworks are not aligned, then the complexity will be even more. In addition, we would like to see long-term visibility about the carbon pricing. We already pay about EUTS for the last 2 years, but we don't know how a global IMO carbon price system will look. And finally, I would like to point out the fuel, which is critical. We need to see the fuel availability and not to be available only at certain main hubs, main ports, but also to see the infrastructure at the terminals. And finally, we need to see how these carbon neutral fuels will be treated by the IMO Net Zero framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Dimitri. Lefteri, how the industry is reacting to the current regulation uncertainty and how this affects their strategic planning? The whole industry, not just the owners.
Yeah, exactly. But I will start with what Dimitris was saying, that we need a signal, and the regulations give a signal, and I will not say signal, so a pressure to do something towards the owners. But a signal should also go to other industries, as you said, because we need to understand that the global framework needs to give the incentive and a clear signal to fuel producers. If certain fuels, this is going to be 1, 2, 3 different fuels, depending also on ship type and trade, like it was highlighted in previous panels, we will not have, of course, one solution for everyone, in order to create enough fuel for the ships to consume. Coming back to our industry, we have seen that ship owners have done their part. If we see the gross tonnage going to be delivered until 2030, 2032, it is more than enough, the percentage of alternative fuels that we will be able to consume in order to comply even with the net zero framework as we know it so far, until for the target of 2030. And that is mainly, of course, LNG for the time being, and for very big vessels with very standard routes that they can consume and find this LNG and also transfer this cost to the end consumer. And this trend for the time being continues. If we see what the market is doing over the last 12 months, we have an 11% of ships being delivered with LNG, mainly as an alternative solution, and methanol at some extent, and if we see it in gross tonnage, is 28%. So the trend continues, but for specific ship types and routes. More traditional vessels like tanker and bulk carriers, which is also the majority of our shipping industry here in Greece, they stick to conventional fuels like they did even before the discussions until we have more clarity. And another voice that we see in the industry, another topic that is being discussed is how to reflect in a regulation and probably in a reward mechanism. Let's see what this is going to be. The investments that ship owners are doing in energy efficiency and other technologies. There are technologies like lubrication, wind assist propulsion, carbon capture, mild hybridization in some very specific ship types, that these are not reflected currently in a global regulation. So the working groups that are working now for the LCA for the fuels, are working in carbon capture technology. We may see also such technologies to be accounted for in a regulation. This is very, very important, because if a ship now is 25, 30% more efficient than a ship that was built 10, 15, 20 years ago, why not give it an incentive? We have correction factors for ships with specific profiles that they try to bring them in an even profile. Let's do the same also for energy efficiency. Why not? This is what we see being discussed.
Thank you. Alexander, with NZF dead, can global and regional regulations realistically be aligned, or are we heading toward a permanent fragmentation?
From the situation that we have in front of us, it seems that we're going to have a fragmentation situation. We all hope that we will not. Like I said in the opening statement, we need global regulations. At some point, and I said in another conference, that shipping might be lucky that NZF didn't go forward. Because imagine, with all the turbulence that's happening right now in the world, you had to comply with all these things. The most difficult part for the ship owners and class societies would be adapting to this regulation, and in different regions. Then you have small countries that they have their own regulations, and you have change of plans on the voyage. You're ready to comply to what's going to happen to Djibouti, for example, and then you get ordered for somewhere else. So this cannot be workable or sustainable. So we hope that, hopefully, even if it takes some more time, IMO will find a solution, will have a global regulation that regional or local regulation will take back. The problem there is, of course, money. Because when you are used to, and let's talk about where we live, EU, when you're used to in a lot of money, and right now we all know that unfortunately this money doesn't go back to shipping, how are you going to stop this? Because this is now effect on the EU budget, that if they decide to go ahead, they need to take it out. So that's what I think is the bigger problem down the line, and we all hope that we'll get a global regulation, even today, as things stand today again, because things are changing dynamically. We hope it's going to change, and we're not going to have only regional and local regulations.
But EU, they do agree to take back, let's say, some of the local EU regulations in case IMO regulations are agreed upon. But if there is no agreement, it means that EU regulation will keep on running.
Of course, but the thing is, the key word on what you said is sum. So what is that sum? At what level would satisfy the rest of the governments to take and agree on the IMO level? Because I think this will be a condition at the end of the day, that we all agree to a global regulation and everything else is quashed, or we don't move forward. So I'm not sure how each government will react to that. I mean, we saw even in the EU situation that because of Greece and Cyprus, we had a different view. Well, we're supposed to be a united front, and this is a challenge that as a region we need to face, that everybody thinks that it's a group of countries that they can agree on certain things, and it was obvious that they didn't, just nobody have talked to it until the voting time. So I think it's a learning process for all of us, because a lot of things has been changing, and we need to keep the faith in IMO that they're going to keep doing what they're doing best, even though CII is not one of the best work, and stay on the technical aspects of shipping and leave the monetary things to others and not IMO.
Okay, thank you. Dimitri, do you see the energy transition accelerating fleet renewal, or will ship owners delay investments due to uncertainty?
I see that both are happening at the same time. There is an acceleration of fleet renewal, there are stricter regulations, and older ships become less competitive. They consume more fuel, that means additional emissions, that consequently results to more exposure, financial exposure due to the environmental regulation. There is also market pressure. Charterers tend to prefer more eco-friendly vessels. But on the other hand, there are delays to have a fleet renewal. There's uncertainty about fuels, about alternative fuel, carbon neutral fuel, what will be the winner between the alternative fuels. There is lack of infrastructure, and there is also high investment cost with regards to the retrofit or new technologies. So what ship owners are doing, they are focusing on flexibility. They prefer to have some short-term solutions like biofuels, or equip the vessel with some energy-saving devices, and they may adapt later.
Thank you. George, a key concern across the industry is that the global supply of alternative fuels will fall short of meeting regulatory decarbonization targets. In this context, what potential role can onboard carbon capture and storage play, and where does the regulatory framework for its deployment stand?
Thank you, Harris. Very good question. As you said, there is significant uncertainty around the future availability of alternative fuels in the global markets. There are also concerns about the safety aspects and the cost premium of these fuels. In this context, onboard carbon capture, or OCCS, is viewed as a complementary pathway to decarbonize shipping. OCCS is attractive because it has the potential to allow ships to reduce net GHG emissions while continuing to use the conventional fossil fuels, which of course remain widely available and affordable today and in the near to mid-term. However, OCCS has challenges. These include CapEx and OpEx, the energy penalty associated with capturing and liquefying CO2, the storage space required on board, and the availability of off-takers and value chains that can certify that the captured CO2 is permanently stored or utilized. As a result, the business case for OCCS will depend on a variety of factors, including vessel characteristics, the trade pattern, and most importantly, the extent to which regulatory frameworks allow for captured CO2 to be credited. And that brings us to where the regulation currently stands. So under EU ETS, captured CO2 can be deducted from the total GHG emissions if the CO2 is permanently stored on a site compliant with the CCS directive. Besides geological storage, the captured CO2 that is permanently utilized can also be deducted from the EU ETS emissions if the utilization is compliant with the relevant EU legislation. Under FuelEU Maritime, OCCS is not currently recognized. However, the European Commission is required to review the regulation by the end of 2027, and the possibility to account for OCCS in the calculation of the ship's GHG intensity and compliance balance will be considered in this review. Now, at IMO level, work is already underway. MEPC has initiated the development of a regulatory framework for the use of OCCS with the objective of supporting the reduction of net GHG emissions without causing adverse environmental impacts. And completion for this framework is targeted for 2028. The Correspondence Group on OCCS has submitted its report to MEPC 84, which includes draft guidelines on testing, survey, certification, and approval of OCCS systems. These draft guidelines also introduce monitoring requirements to quantify emissions associated with OCCS operation, as well as requirements for an approved OCCS management plan. The draft guidelines follow a technology-neutral approach with generic requirements applicable to all OCCS systems, while addressing more mature technologies first. The Correspondence Group also discussed the acceptable means of disposal for captured CO2 or carbon compounds, noting that any such discharge to sea would fall under the remit of the London Convention and Protocol. The Correspondence Group will be re-established and will report to MEPC 86. In parallel, MSC has instructed the CCC subcommittee to develop safety requirements for the use of OCCS.
Aris?
Thank you.
If I may add something to the early point of George, is that the price. I think we're not giving justice to shipping when we keep going back to price. The fact is that shipping is used over its entirety to be burning the lowest and cheapest fuel available. This will change. In Libya, we are fuel agnostic, and we believe that any...
What other industries, I want to add, what other industries could not use? What was left out of it?
What is left out, so we take the bottom of the barrel. So we need to be cognizant that from now on, we're going to pay more. At the end of the day, this is not paid by shipping. We have fuel surcharges because of war, because of uncertainty, all the time. These are going up to all of us, the end consumer. So this discussion about more expensive fuel that is going to be a reality needs to get off the table. Because the decision that you made on the ship owners that we're talking here is the initial investment. Because that's the cost you lay out up front. Everything else that comes, the end consumer will pay. So it will be irrelevant if we're talking about 300, 500, 2,000 per ton on whatever fuel we are discussing. Because if we keep discussing about expensive fuels, then the perception is that we're never going to have them, and that doesn't help our industry. So just a point.
But it's still a decision to be made by the ship owner. What type of alternative fuel you're going to use? So if this decision is not the right one, then you got penalized for that. You're not going to pay for the fuel, but somebody else who pays for a fuel that is less expensive, he's going to get the job.
That's when the regulations come in. So the price has to do more of the regulation and what credits or penalize you're going to give to each fuel. At the end of the day, it is a commercial decision like it is today. So if we put all things together, then that's how they make the decision. So I'm just going to say that this shouldn't be the major thing, what the price of the end product would be, because we know that it's going to be much more expensive than it is today. Otherwise, we're not going to see any fuel development.
Okay, let me ask you one more thing then. Given this regulatory uncertainty, what does the fuel supply chain actually need? Clarity, timing, incentives to make alternative fuels available at scale while keeping costs realistic?
All. It's not one thing. We could put it in order that you need regulation first, but you need all. Without each of them being in right timing and right pace, it's not going to move forward. So we need all. I wish I could be more clear and say we need one thing and everything will get fixed, but I don't think.
Yeah, this is what the industry, the marine industry needs. I mean, we need fuel that is going to be safe, it's going to be affordable, and it's going to be available.
And the resilience of bankerings and shipping has shown that we can deliver. As long as we know what is needed, the producers will deliver, then the last mile, that is our members, the banker supplier, will bring it to the market, and at the end of the day, the ship owners will buy it and burn it. So if we have all this, then it is proven that the industry is resilient and will do what it has to do.
Okay, let us change course then. Lefteri, what has been the industry experience and impact after 2 years of ETS and the first year of FuelEU?
Exactly as you said, now we are during the period of the first year of FuelEU. Second year of EU ETS, we're actually paying 70% of the emissions that we produced in Europe from last year, and now 2026 is the last one, which from now on we're going to have 100% phase-in. What we have seen so far, and this is quite a good timing because today is the deadline for the verification of these jobs, from our hat as verifier, we can see that we're quite well prepared, having invested early on a fully digital platform in order to deliver these jobs on time for anyone that has also submitted data on time. But also, not only us, but also shipping companies were very well prepared because since ETS started, the focus on emissions and performance and data recording has increased tremendously because actually money are now involved. It's not only some data that we are monitoring. Additionally, we have a trend in the market that we see more and more is that we are now talking about verification of a voyage or a time charter period within the year, securing very good quality of data inside the year, close monitoring, and not to rush at the last moment, close to the deadline, to throw all data completely uncontrolled in order to complete the verification work. So from commercial side, what we are seeing is that the trend of ETS is continuing. For the majority of the cases, charterers are covering these costs, and this is how this has been working until now. While for FuelEU, we see more options available, but even as we are getting closer and closer to the end of April, that we need to have decided what flexibility mechanism is going to work for us, we see that the vast majority is going for an external pool to minimize the costs because it has been proven that there are a lot of credits available in the market from vessels that are burning biofuels, LNG, bio-LNG, and they are trading or they are transferring passengers inside the EU that then create a lot of credits to cover everyone. And it is also proven more financial beneficial compared to, of course, paying the penalty, but even for a company to burn a biofuel on themselves, which includes also other operational and risk items that they need to assess. And this means that very few are left to pay the penalty to the authorities, leading to an understanding for all EU, not only us as an industry, that at least for the first 5 years, where also the margin is very small from the target, EU is not going to have the expected income that they were expecting from FuelEU, while ETS is continuing as normal. This is what we see.
Thank you. Dimitri, from the operator's point of view, what have we learned for FuelEU and EU ETS?
Yeah. Let me start with the data. As a member of the Operational Technology and Energy Management Department, I will highlight the part of the data that are critical. Crew on board, captains, chief engineers, fill in many forms on a daily basis, and they fill in consumptions and other data related to the emissions. However, even a small discrepancy on fuel consumption on a daily basis, this will result in a deviation on the emission and consequently to the financial exposure due to the EU ETS or FuelEU Maritime. So we need to check the data we need to apply some logical controls even at the source of the data, at the platforms, and if feasible, to compare the manual entries with sensor data. At LATSCO, we have invested at sensors, and all our vessels are equipped with sensors, so we can monitor and compare the data from the crew with the sensors on board. And then we moved one step further. We have our in-house platform where we calculate the emissions, and we have verified this platform by independent organization. So our measurements and the whole process is accurate now. So one more point I would like to highlight is that the new regulations have created a new whole process within the shipping company. Data need to be collected at office, need to be checked, and then submitted to the verifier, and finally to be shared. These verified reports by the Classification Society need to be shared with the charterers. As a result, a lot of cooperation is necessary between the departments at the shipping management company. For example, technical department and operational department need to check daily the data. Performance department also contribute to this task, as well as chartering or finance department, or even sustainability. And one more point I would like to add about the lessons learned is that, especially for spot market, for vessels that are in the spot market, we need to properly calculate, predict, and estimate the cost that will be related due to the EU ETS and Fuel EU voyage. So we have our calculator in order to prepare the next voyage and include this cost to the spot market freight rate.
Thank you. George, now that we had the experience from EU ETS and Fuel EU, UK came up with their own ETS scheme. How should the ship owners and operators prepare themselves for compliance for UK ETS, and is there a potential for its scope to expand further?
Thank you, Haris. So following Brexit, UK created its own ETS scheme. The UK ETS expansion to maritime will apply from 1st July 2026 and will cover CO2, methane and nitrous oxide emissions. The UK ETS scope will include emissions from domestic voyages, defined as those between UK ports, and emissions within UK ports, regardless of whether the voyage is domestic or international. So a vessel going to UK from another country will have to surrender allowances for the emissions generated while within the UK port. By default, the registered owner is considered the maritime operator responsible for UK ETS compliance. However, the registered owner can delegate this responsibility to the ISM company through a legally binding written agreement. In case of such delegation, the ISM company must provide the registered owner's contact details and complete declaration of delegated responsibility within the METS service portal. Under the UK ETS, each maritime operator must have a single emissions monitoring plan covering all ships under its responsibility. The emissions monitoring plan must be completed and submitted to the regulator through the METS service portal. And it is important to highlight here that under UK ETS, the emissions monitoring plans are not approved by verifiers. They are approved by the regulator, and a single emissions monitoring plan is required per operator, not per ship. Specifically, for maritime operators who are resident or have their registered address in England or outside of the UK, these operators will be regulated by the environment agency under the UK ETS. And these operators can already open an account in METS and apply for an emissions monitoring plan. During this early onboarding voluntary phase, emissions monitoring plans will be approved only in principle. Formal issuance will begin from 1st July 2026. Once the emissions monitoring plan is formally issued, a maritime operator holding account, or MOHA, will be created in the UK Emissions Trading Registry. And this will enable the operator to acquire and surrender UK allowances. Operators must also appoint an accredited verifier to verify their annual emissions report. From 1st July 2026 and from 1st January in the subsequent years, the operator will start monitoring emissions according to their approved emissions monitoring plan. And by 31st of March, after each scheme year, the operator will submit a single verified annual emissions report to the regulator, including the emissions from all ships under its responsibility. And also a significant point here is that no document of compliance will be issued under the UK ETS. The compliance will be managed through the METS platform and the UK ETS emissions trading registry. Offshore ships will enter the scope of UK ETS from 1st January 2027 in line with the EU ETS. And with regard to potential further expansion of the UK ETS to additional maritime emissions, the UK ETS authority will review the scheme in 2028 to consider lowering the scope's threshold to 400 GT instead of the 5,000 GT, which is the current one. And additionally, the UK ETS intends to expand the scheme from 2028 to include emissions from international maritime voyages starting or ending in the UK. And the scope will cover 50% of those emissions in line with the EU ETS.
Thank you, George. We ran out of appetizers, but we still have 5 minutes. We can get some questions, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much, everybody. I have one question regarding this submission of Panama. I understand that there will be no penalty. So how will the incentives work for somebody that needs to spend 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 million dollars extra per ship? How will he recover this?
You mean if they are going for an alternative fuel? And this comes back to what I mentioned, that this regulation is not for the time being giving a clear signal to go for an alternative technology. However, with the fuels that we have now in the market, which is mainly biofuel and LNG, third-party portals are going to be created to trade owner between owner, not a central fund to gather money, in order to close the gaps with this SUs and become compliant. But the trend is going to be very, very slow, and indeed, such an investment will be tremendously difficult to have an ROI that makes sense. That's true.
Thank you very much. Questions? Stavros?
I think Harris avoided a critical question, which is when do you expect that we will have an agreement on what to do with... I heard a lot of optimistic opinions, but...
If I had this answer, I would be a billionaire.
Nobody wants a concrete reply. I'm asking for your opinion.
I think
I'm asking because I heard some optimistic news. It will happen. We are discussing in IMO. We are doing this, and that. And what I see is, personally, that it will be impossible to reach an agreement before 2030, 2031. And the other issue is that we have new intermediate targets for reduction of emissions that are pushing the net zero effect or whatever by 2050 further backwards. So is it going to happen, this 2050 zero emissions for cities?
My personal opinion is that we are not going to see something happening before Mr. Trump goes home, goes to his Florida house, together with...
Harris, this is 2029.
Yes,
And then we have to start discussing.
and then I think then we'll start discussing seriously.
Also, somebody said that there are problems with fleet renewal. There are no problems with fleet renewal. And the only way to see if there are problems is to see how many ships are scrapped. And there are no ships scrapped for very little, not those. So fleet renewal is going ahead. But we have more leads. The size of the fleet is increasing. And the issue that is now being created because the size of the fleet is increasing is that every year emissions from the industry, not emissions per ship, will go up instead of going down.
Which is natural.
Yes, please. The mic, use the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex Argazos by name. I'm a former chairman of an IMO committee. Now, there are very interesting things discussed here. I would like to touch quickly on several of them. First, EU will never agree with IMO unless IMO adopts a regulation which is more or less the EU regulation. Don't have hopes, futile hopes. The second thing is about the USA participation in the IMO. USA always plays a double game. In Marpol, they were participating in the discussions, and then they rejected Marpol and they adopted OPA. Well, now, I think a mistake we are making is that optimization thing. Mr. Hadjigeorgiou touched about that, about the radio officer, which was a very big mistake. And this had other aspects. With the Hyder style steel, for example, generated a generation of unseaworthy ships. Well, now, in the connection of the unmanned ship, I think that we are going to the same wrong direction. People always will be needed. Machines will never replace people. We have to adopt that and stop about fantasizing.
What we can agree is that they are not going to replace people, but they are going to limit the workplace,
okay.
the workplace within a ship.
Mr. Chairman, this goes in the context of the profit optimization, which is a good thing, but sometimes a good thing, sometimes is a bad thing. So we need to be wise there. Now, coming to my friend Stavros' question, when those alternative fuels will be a reality, this is directly connected to the political will. When the politicians will decide, we will have them. Otherwise, we will go as we go now with the fusion of fuel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think this is what Alexander said. He said it's not IMO to blame. It's the government. It's the government.
The political will is
And it's
the
actually
bottom line.
it's not the environment anymore, it's fuel security discussion in IMO.
Sorry?
It's not so much about the environment anymore, but more for the fuel security between countries. I mean, China, they have their own...
Well, IMO is the countries.
Exactly.
The Secretariat is the
So they
Senate.
have their own targets and
Because
agendas.
there is a misconception of that. Will the government decide to have their fuels and then the cost-profit assessment is running? But then other ones
Also, the point, the fuels are available. Even if you have, they are in small quantities, but you have right now biofuel, LNG, methanol and ethanol is coming. So from all what we have heard for the last 10 years, the only one that it seems that is out is ammonia. So everything else is moving. It's a matter of quantities that obviously we know that none of them, except probably LNG because it's still a fossil fuel, can serve the whole shipping needs. So if we take each of it, each part, fuel is there. It's just how much it's going to cost and not what quantities.
Thank you.
Well, I think this has concluded today's summit. Thank you very much, Mrs. Vasilaki, and thank you very much, everybody, for participating in this summit. Mr. Gadzikis and everybody else, and it's lunchtime.
Thank you.